The employee was blamed for a mistake, but his quick thinking and decisive actions ended up saving the entire company. Watch and subscribe. Ethan Reed adjusted the strap of his worn leather bag as he stood outside the glass doors of Griffin & Cole, one of New York's fastest-growing tech consultancies. The autumn air bit at his face, but the crispness invigorated him. Today was his first day, the day he had dreamed about for months, after endless interviews, unpaid internships, and late nights buried in spreadsheets. He had imagined walking through those doors as a confident professional, a person who belonged in the world of skyscrapers and corner offices. In reality, the city's hum made him feel small, insignificant, and painfully aware of the faded suit he had been forced to buy on a budget. Pushing through the revolving doors, he immediately felt the weight of expectations pressing down. The lobby gleamed with polished marble, sunlight spilling through floor-to-ceiling windows, bouncing off glass walls and chrome fixtures. Around him, employees moved with purpose, their polished shoes tapping the floors in synchrony, their voices crisp and controlled. Ethan's sneakers squeaked slightly as he walked. He cursed under his breath, wishing he'd borrowed a pair of more professional shoes from his cousin. "Good morning. You must be Ethan," said a bright, efficient receptionist, glancing up from her dual monitors. Her voice carried warmth, but also a subtle professional sharpness, as though testing him in this first encounter. Ethan nodded, offering a polite smile, but it felt forced, like a mask that didn't quite fit. He was led to his department, a maze of open workspaces filled with clusters of employees typing furiously, phones ringing, and the occasional sharp laugh cutting through the air. Here it was clear. Mistakes were noticed, remembered, and sometimes punished publicly. "Meet your mentor, James," said the supervisor, a tall man in a fitted suit, carrying the air of authority and calm dominance. James extended a hand, firm and deliberate, his eyes sharp but not unkind. "We're on a tight deadline today. I'll walk you through the initial setup, and then it's your responsibility to complete it by end of day." Ethan nodded again, heart pounding in a rhythm that matched the click of keyboards around him. As he followed James to his workstation, he noted the monitors glowing with complex charts, financial data, and project timelines. The team murmured behind him, low whispers that hinted at judgment, curiosity, and maybe even amusement at the newcomer. He was eager to prove himself, to justify every sleepless night and every dollar spent preparing for this moment. His fingers flew across the keyboard, importing files, aligning spreadsheets, and carefully entering figures. For an hour, everything seemed to go smoothly. The rhythm of work, the steady tapping of keys, the soft hum of printers, the occasional ring of phones, felt oddly comforting. Then it happened. Ethan misread one column of data, entering numbers that were slightly off. It wasn't a massive error, not catastrophic in isolation, but in a department where precision was worshipped, even minor mistakes could draw sharp attention. James noticed immediately, his sharp eyes narrowing. "Ethan, these figures don't align with the source documents," he said, voice calm, but edged with a razor scrutiny. Ethan's stomach twisted. I must have misread. I'll correct it right away," he stammered, sweat prickling at his temples. Before he could fix it, another voice cut through the hum of the office, louder, more accusatory. "Seriously? This is your first day, and you already mess up the base report." A woman from the team, mid-30s, crossed her arms, smirking. "You think just because you have a degree, you can waltz in here and not make a fool of yourself?" Her laughter was sharp, echoing in the open space, and several co-workers glanced over, smirking or nodding. Ethan felt his face burn. He tried to explain, to justify, to show competence. I double-checked the files, but I must have misaligned a row." His voice was nervous, faltering, drowned in the murmurs of the surrounding employees. The supervisor, James, placed a steady hand on his shoulder, pulling him aside. "Ignore them. Focus on fixing it. Nobody's perfect, Ethan, but you need to act fast. Deadlines don't forgive mistakes." The reassurance helped slightly, yet the whispers and smirks lingered in his mind like an invisible pressure pressing down. He returned to the workstation, fingers flying again, recalculating, realigning data, sweat running down his temple. Just as he was about to submit the corrected report, the senior manager, Karen Blake, approached. Her presence alone seemed to tighten the air. She had a commanding aura, sharp tailored suit, precise bun pulling back dark hair, and eyes that scanned every detail with forensic precision. "Ethan Reed, a moment," she said, her voice cutting through the background noise like a scalpel. Ethan froze, heart hammering, and followed her to a quieter corner of the floor. "I've been watching the team's progress," she began, tone cold but controlled. "Your first mistake has already caused delays in the project timeline. Are you confident you understand the level of precision we demand here?" Her gaze pierced him, scanning his expression, searching for weakness, determination, or excuse. Ethan swallowed hard. "Stay calm, stay honest." "Yes, Ms. Blake. I made an error, but I've corrected it and double-checked everything. I understand the expectations, and I will not repeat it." His voice trembled slightly, but carried a hint of resolve. She raised an eyebrow, silent for a moment, letting him feel the weight of her judgment. Then, surprisingly, a flicker of approval softened her features. "Good. Own your mistakes. Learn fast. That's the only way you'll survive here." She turned and walked away, leaving Ethan with a rush of relief and an awareness of how high the stakes truly were. Returning to his desk, he felt the team's eyes on him again, some curious, some skeptical, some openly mocking. A whisper reached his ears. Will he really make it through the week? Ethan ignored it, focusing on the tasks ahead. Each calculation, each line of code, each careful alignment of data became a silent promise. He would not let this place crush him. Yet, even as he worked, a subtle tension lingered. Ethan realized this wasn't just about a single mistake. It was a test, an initiation into the unforgiving rhythm of corporate life. And deep down, he felt a spark, a thrill even at the thought of proving not just his competence, but his resilience. By the end of the day, the report was submitted, flawless this time, but the whispers had not stopped. Ethan left the office late, shoulders heavy but mind racing. Outside, the city lights reflected off the wet pavement, taxis honking, pedestrians bustling past. He inhaled deeply, the chill of the evening mingling with a strange exhilaration. Tomorrow, he thought, I start over, and I will not be humiliated again. As he walked home, he noticed the little details, the flicker of a street lamp, the aroma of roasting chestnuts from a corner vendor, the laughter of children passing by. Each sensation grounded him, reminding him of why he had fought to get here, why he would fight again. The day had tested him, yes, but it had also illuminated the path. Mistakes were inevitable, judgment unavoidable, but determination and courage, those he could control. And somewhere, in the city's sprawling lights, Ethan felt the first pulse of his quiet rebellion. He would not just survive this place. He would reshape it. The morning sunlight poured into Ethan Reed's small apartment as his alarm blared at 6:15 a.m. The city outside was already alive. The distant hum of traffic, the clanging of construction, the occasional wail of a siren weaving through the early rush. Ethan rubbed his eyes, feeling the lingering exhaustion from yesterday's whirlwind, and stared at his reflection in the mirror. The worn suit he had borrowed from his cousin hung on him slightly too loosely, and his tie drooped at an angle that didn't seem to matter. But this was no time for self-pity. Today, he reminded himself, was the day he would show the office that yesterday's mistakes were just a blip, a momentary stumble in his otherwise determined trajectory. His hand lingered briefly over the worn leather strap of his bag before he zipped it up. Every item packed felt like armor against the uncertainty that awaited him. Arriving at Griffin & Cole, Ethan was greeted by the familiar sheen of the lobby, the polished floors reflecting the energy and intensity of the corporate world. But today, he noticed subtle differences, eyes glancing at him, murmurs of curiosity, and a few thinly veiled smirks. His misstep yesterday had traveled faster than he expected. He felt a flicker of anxiety, then reminded himself, focus on the work. Ignore the whispers. He settled at his workstation and logged into the system. Files awaited him, sprawling project plans with tight deadlines and exacting requirements. The pressure mounted immediately. Emails flooded in, and notifications pinged incessantly. James, his mentor, leaned over his shoulder. "Ethan, the Hawkins report needs revisions based on last night's client feedback. And make sure you cross-check the numbers with the finance team this time," James said, voice steady, yet edged with urgency. Ethan nodded, determination replacing anxiety, and immersed himself in the spreadsheets. But then, a new challenge arrived. Marla Kent, a senior analyst known for her piercing gaze and unforgiving critique, approached. She towered slightly over him, her impeccable black suit framing a posture of authority. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor, commanding attention. "Reed," she said, voice sharp, "I need to review the draft of the Benson pitch. And I hope you've learned from yesterday's fiasco." Ethan's stomach tightened. He opened the draft, fingers trembling slightly as he navigated through complex data points and client notes. Marla hovered, scrutinizing every line, occasionally pointing out minor inconsistencies. "This needs alignment. And your references? Are they up to date?" she asked, leaning closer. Ethan's pulse quickened. "Stay calm. Don't let her see fear." "Yes, Miss Kent. I've cross-referenced all the data. I'll make sure everything matches the client's notes before submission," he replied, maintaining eye contact, trying to convey confidence he didn't fully feel. Marla's expression softened momentarily. "Good. Just be precise. This client doesn't tolerate mistakes." She straightened and walked away, leaving Ethan with a blend of relief and lingering tension. As the day unfolded, the office atmosphere felt like a high-stakes chessboard. Every interaction, every email, every spreadsheet adjustment mattered. Ethan noticed whispers again, some sympathetic, some skeptical, but he focused on the work. The Hawkins report consumed him. Projections, graphs, and client expectations intertwining like a complex puzzle. During lunch, Ethan ventured into the break room, hoping for a brief respite. But the room buzzed with gossip. One coworker, leaning against the counter, smirked and said, "So, the rookie thinks he can survive here. Did you see him scramble yesterday?" Another chuckled softly. Ethan's heart sank. Why does everyone care about my mistakes more than my work? He picked at a sandwich silently, pretending to be absorbed in his phone. Suddenly, his phone vibrated. A notification, a video message from a client he had met briefly yesterday. His curiosity piqued. Ethan tapped play. The video showed an executive shaking his head, mentioning minor errors in the report, but highlighting Ethan's prompt corrections and attention to detail. Relief washed over him. Perhaps not everyone judged him solely on mistakes. Perhaps opportunity lingered even in missteps. Returning to his desk, Ethan resolved to tackle the next set of challenges with renewed vigor. But the day's intensity was only beginning. Around mid-afternoon, James approached again, his brow furrowed. "Ethan, I need you in the conference room. The client has some urgent questions, and they specifically requested your input." The words made Ethan's pulse race. Conference rooms were public, high-visibility spaces where mistakes became magnified. Walking in, he noticed the clients, 3 men in crisp suits, faces carved with authority, and expressions that seemed both curious and skeptical. Ethan swallowed and stepped forward, introducing himself with calm authority he didn't entirely feel. The discussion began. Questions were rapid-fire, data points were challenged, and projections were scrutinized under a microscope. Ethan answered as best as he could, sometimes hesitating, sometimes stumbling over words, but always maintaining composure. At one point, a client leaned forward, eyebrows raised, and said, "Are you sure these projections are accurate? Your calculations yesterday weren't perfect." Ethan met his gaze directly. "Yes, I've double-checked everything, and the figures align with both the client's records and internal benchmarks. If there's a specific concern, I can address it immediately." The room fell silent for a moment. Then, the lead client nodded slowly, a subtle but clear sign of acknowledgement. The tension lifted slightly, replaced by a cautious respect. By the late afternoon, Ethan was exhausted, but exhilarated. Each challenge, each critique, each whispered judgment had pushed him to sharpen his skills, refine his focus, and assert his presence. The day ended with a small acknowledgement from James. "Good work today, Ethan. You're learning fast." Walking out into the crisp evening air, Ethan felt the weight of the day settle onto his shoulders. Yet there was an unmistakable thrill, a sense that despite the scrutiny, the gossip, and the pressure, he was carving a path, proving himself. The city lights blurred into streaks as he rode the subway home, his mind replaying every conversation, every glance, every moment of tension. At home, he collapsed into a chair, reviewing notes for tomorrow's assignments. He reflected on the whispers, the critiques, the subtle judgments. And then he made a quiet vow. "I will not just survive here. I will rise. I will make every glance, every smirk, every doubt work in my favor." Outside, the city continued its relentless pulse, oblivious to the rookie struggling to find his place. But Ethan felt for the first time that he could match that pulse, that he could bend the chaos into opportunity, that he was no longer merely a newcomer. He was a contender. The next morning, the city was blanketed in the gray, muted light of an overcast sky, the kind that made streets glisten with wet reflections from a recent rain. Ethan Reed pulled on his slightly worn but neatly pressed suit, brushing his hair back in the mirror as he rehearsed the words he would say, preparing for another day under scrutiny. The previous day had been exhausting yet empowering, and he hoped today would build on that momentum. Entering Griffin and Cole, Ethan immediately sensed a shift in the office atmosphere. Whispers were less pronounced. Glances no longer carried the same skeptical weight. Perhaps yesterday's resilience had left an impression, but he knew better than to relax. In a place where perception often mattered more than performance, he needed to stay vigilant. James intercepted him near the elevator. "Ethan, I have something for you. The Benson project, there's been a last-minute change. The client requested a different presentation, and they specifically asked you to lead it. They want someone to explain the strategy clearly, and they believe in your insight." Ethan felt his pulse quicken. The opportunity was massive, but so were the stakes. One misstep could undo all progress from yesterday. He nodded, swallowing the mix of anxiety and excitement. "I'll be ready," he replied, voice steady but internally brimming with adrenaline. In the conference room, Ethan set up his laptop and notes. The client representatives began to arrive. 3 executives with sharp suits, subtle rings, and polished shoes, carrying the authority and confidence of individuals accustomed to control. The tension was palpable as they seated themselves, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, scrutiny, and skepticism. As he started the presentation, Ethan noticed subtle signs of doubt, a slight tilt of a head, a raised eyebrow, a barely perceptible frown. Yet he also detected moments of engagement, the client who nodded slightly at a key data point, another leaning forward to listen more intently. His voice remained calm and deliberate, each word measured to convey certainty and competence. Halfway through the presentation, an unexpected question arose. One client asked, "How do you account for the projected risks in your strategy, especially considering last quarter's deviations?" Ethan paused for a split second, weighing the phrasing of his response carefully. Then, with controlled confidence, he replied, "We've incorporated contingency scenarios for each risk, including historical deviations. By modeling potential fluctuations, we've ensured our projections remain robust while allowing flexibility for unforeseen challenges." A subtle shift occurred. The executive's eyes, once critical, now reflected measured approval. Ethan pressed on, elaborating on strategic adjustments, financial safeguards, and client-centric solutions. The dialogue grew interactive. Questions, clarifications, and even light challenges, each addressed with precision. Ethan's composure inspired confidence. Even skeptical glances softened into acknowledgement. Meanwhile, within the office, Ethan's colleagues observed through the glass walls. Some exchanged surprised looks. Marla Kent, the senior analyst who had scrutinized him relentlessly, leaned against the wall, crossing her arms, her expression unreadable yet attentive. Her presence reminded him that every detail mattered. Gestures, tone, pauses, and the subtle confidence that radiated when speaking under pressure. As the presentation neared its conclusion, a client leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "Mr. Reed, your explanations are clear, and your projections are thorough. We're impressed by your ability to handle this under such short notice." Relief and a quiet surge of pride surged through Ethan. He nodded, thanking the clients professionally while internally savoring the small victory. After the clients departed, James approached with a rare smile. "Ethan, that was exceptional. You handled pressure, scrutiny, and a tough audience with professionalism. You've earned their trust and ours." Ethan exhaled, a mixture of relief, pride, and renewed determination flooding his senses. Later that afternoon, Ethan received a private message from one of the clients he had impressed. "We'd like to discuss a potential role in our upcoming strategic project. Your insights and clarity could be invaluable." Ethan's heart raced. This was beyond the internal office recognition. It was external validation from someone with influence and vision. But challenges continued. Within the office, whispers resumed. Some colleagues congratulated him privately. Others barely concealed jealousy. The delicate dance of office politics persisted, but Ethan had discovered that resilience, preparation, and calm execution could counteract doubt and hostility. Returning to his desk, he reviewed upcoming tasks, prioritizing efficiency while maintaining quality. A small notebook filled with notes, diagrams, and reminders lay open before him. Each scribble represented a strategy, a caution, or a personal mantra. He traced a finger over a phrase he had written yesterday, turned challenges into opportunities. Let every mistake teach, every doubt motivate. By the evening, exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him. But before leaving, James called him into a quiet office. "Ethan, I want to tell you something. Today, you proved more than skill. You proved character. And in this world, character matters just as much as talent." The words resonated deeply, reaffirming his growing belief that perseverance, integrity, and composure could indeed create opportunity. As Ethan stepped into the cool night air, city lights sparkling against the gray sky, he realized that yesterday's misstep and today's triumph were interconnected. The initial judgment, the whispers, the subtle skepticism, they were not obstacles but catalysts. Each misstep provided lessons. Each scrutiny refined his approach. Each tense moment sharpened his awareness. He walked toward the subway, reflecting on the path ahead. The day had proven that opportunity was not merely about being in the right place, but about being ready when the moment arrived. As trains rumbled past and the city thrummed with ceaseless energy, Ethan knew he had crossed a threshold. He was no longer just reacting. He was beginning to anticipate, to maneuver, to claim his place in a world that demanded resilience, skill, and courage. At home, as he prepared for the next day, Ethan allowed himself a quiet acknowledgement of growth. The journey was far from over, but he had learned the crucial lesson. When preparation meets opportunity, even the most unexpected challenges can become turning points. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new scrutiny, and new moments of doubt, but he would be ready. He had learned to embrace the pressure, to convert tension into focus, and to trust in his own ability to navigate the unpredictable currents of professional life. The morning arrived with an uneasy calm. Ethan entered Griffin and Cole with a determined stride, fully aware that the day could either solidify his position or dismantle the fragile trust he had begun to earn. The open-plan office was quiet, but subtle movements and hurried glances betrayed an underlying tension. Colleagues whispered in hushed tones as he passed, some casting supportive nods, while others gave looks of barely concealed disdain. James intercepted him by the elevators, his face unusually tight. "Ethan, the situation has shifted. There's a complication with the Benson project. The client has raised concerns about the financial assumptions, and there's chatter among the board that some internal recommendations might not align with their expectations." His voice was calm, yet the implication of an internal conflict was clear. Ethan nodded, steeling himself. He had anticipated that success would attract both attention and envy, but he had not expected such a calculated pushback so quickly. "Understood. I'll address it directly," he replied, masking any hint of apprehension. He made his way to the conference room, where several board members had gathered, along with a few key managers. At the head of the table was Walter Griffin, a senior partner with sharp gray hair and piercing eyes, whose reputation for ruthlessness preceded him. Beside him, a younger executive, Malcolm, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a faint smirk playing across his face. Malcolm's presence suggested he was prepared to challenge, perhaps even undermine, Ethan's credibility. Ethan began the presentation with a calm precision, outlining revised projections and strategic contingencies. Yet halfway through, he noticed subtle disruptions. Malcolm interjecting with pointed questions, colleagues exchanging smirks or raised eyebrows. Each interruption seemed designed not only to test his knowledge, but also to unsettle him. Then came the pivotal moment. Malcolm leaned forward, eyes glinting with calculated mischief. "Ethan, are you confident that your assumptions are correct? I've reviewed internal memos suggesting discrepancies, and I wonder if your analysis fully considers all variables." His tone was polite, but edged with skepticism, a challenge meant to provoke doubt. Ethan inhaled slowly, centering himself. The room felt charged with tension. Each second stretched as he formulated his response. "I appreciate your concern, Malcolm. I have incorporated every relevant data point, including historical deviations and newly identified risks. Each scenario has been stress-tested, and the outcomes are designed to maintain resilience even under unexpected conditions." His voice remained even, yet his eyes conveyed sharp focus, scanning the room to ensure comprehension and engagement. The dialogue escalated. Questions became pointed, interruptions became more strategic, and the air thickened with the silent dynamics of power, ambition, and skepticism. Each participant in the room was calculating, watching, listening, reacting. Ethan felt the pressure of not just the client's expectations, but also the unspoken rivalries within the office. Despite the intensity, Ethan maintained control. He addressed each challenge methodically, reinforcing his credibility with clear reasoning, evidence-backed analysis, and confident delivery. The room's energy shifted slowly. What began as skepticism started to evolve into acknowledgement. Subtle nods replaced frowns, and the smirk on Malcolm's face softened as he recognized Ethan's skill and composure under fire. However, Ethan knew the true test was yet to come. As the session drew toward its conclusion, Walter Griffin leaned forward, interlacing his fingers. "Ethan, your approach is thorough, and your handling of these questions is impressive. But I need transparency. Are there any risks, internal or external, that you've not disclosed or that could alter these projections?" Ethan hesitated for only a moment, choosing each word carefully. "Sir, there is always uncertainty in any strategic scenario. That said, every potential risk has been analyzed, documented, and communicated. I've taken steps to ensure that no relevant information has been overlooked and all projections are supported by data. My objective is complete transparency and actionable clarity." A brief silence followed. The room collectively absorbed his response. The atmosphere shifted again, this time toward respect, though tempered by cautious calculation. Ethan had survived the direct challenge, but he sensed a subtle undercurrent. Loyalty and rivalry intermingled, and some colleagues were already plotting their next moves. After the board meeting, Ethan returned to his office, aware that the confrontation had earned him credibility, but also painted a target on his back. He reviewed his notes and prepared for follow-up conversations, knowing that any lapse in composure could jeopardize the fragile gains he had made. Late in the afternoon, a private message arrived from an unexpected source, one of the junior analysts who had been quietly observing the exchange. "Ethan, if you have time, come to the small conference room. There's something you need to see." Curiosity piqued, Ethan made his way there, finding a folder of documents left by the analyst. Opening it revealed internal emails and financial memos that had been overlooked or deliberately ignored. The implications were serious: misallocated funds, questionable vendor contracts, and internal communication that suggested intentional obfuscation. Ethan realized the gravity. The discovery could have legal and ethical ramifications, not just for the company, but for the individuals involved. The tension escalated. Ethan now faced a choice: expose the discrepancies and risk the wrath of powerful colleagues, or stay silent and protect his position while potentially allowing malpractice to continue. The weight of responsibility pressed on him, amplified by the ethical clarity that had guided him thus far. As he pondered the situation, Malcolm entered the office unexpectedly, closing the door behind him. "I know what you found," he said bluntly. His tone was neither entirely hostile nor friendly. It carried the weight of someone testing boundaries, gauging reaction. "I've seen the documents. It's a delicate situation. We could leverage this information, or we could handle it quietly. What's your move?" Ethan met Malcolm's gaze, recognizing the unspoken layers of strategy, ambition, and risk. "We handle it transparently," Ethan replied firmly. "No shortcuts, no concealment. We address the issues openly and professionally." Malcolm studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Bold move. I respect it for now. But remember, transparency comes at a cost in this office." Ethan knew the day was far from over. The confrontation had revealed hidden layers of intrigue, ambition, and moral challenge. Every decision carried consequences, every action scrutinized. And yet, he felt a surge of determination, a clarity that he had not experienced before. Ethics, competence, and courage were not just ideals. They were tools for navigating a world of complex interpersonal dynamics and high-stakes decisions. As the evening descended over the city, Ethan reflected on the confrontation. He realized that personal integrity could provoke envy, skepticism, and even hostility, but it could also create opportunity, trust, and alignment with those who shared his vision. The stakes were higher than ever, but the path forward was clearer. Face challenges head-on, act with ethical resolve, and prepare for the unexpected twist that defined both corporate strategy and personal growth. By the time he left Griffin & Cole, the streets glimmered under a fresh drizzle. Ethan felt the weight of responsibility and the exhilaration of potential. Confrontation and betrayal were part of the landscape, but so were insight, courage, and the power to turn scrutiny into leverage. The night air was crisp, carrying the city's hum as a reminder. In a world of calculated moves, every choice mattered, and Ethan had proven he could play the game without compromising who he was. The next morning, Ethan arrived at Griffin & Cole earlier than usual, the city skyline glowing with the first rays of sunlight bouncing off glass towers. The office was quiet, yet he sensed the anticipation in the air. The previous day's confrontation had set the stage for an intricate dance of influence, ambition, and risk. Today, every action could consolidate his credibility or unravel it. He started with a methodical review of the documents he had discovered: the misallocated funds, the questionable vendor contracts, and internal communications that hinted at intentional obfuscation. Each file was a piece of the puzzle, revealing the extent of manipulation and the potential impact on the company's reputation. Ethan knew the key was not just to present the facts, but to strategically frame them in a way that protected the company while exposing the wrongdoing. As he organized his findings, his assistant, Laura, approached, holding a tablet with the latest internal memos. "Ethan, the board meeting is in 15 minutes. There's chatter that Walter and Malcolm are discussing alternative narratives. They may try to downplay yesterday's confrontation," she said, her voice tinged with concern. Ethan nodded, absorbing the warning without showing any sign of nervousness. "Let's make sure the presentation is airtight. Every figure, every email, every implication must be clear and irrefutable. No room for ambiguity." Walking toward the conference room, Ethan noticed subtle shifts among colleagues. Some avoided eye contact, their unease betraying hidden agendas. Others gave quick nods, a silent acknowledgement of support. He felt the weight of expectation, the delicate balance between exposing the truth and navigating corporate politics. The board members were already seated. Walter Griffin sat at the head of the table, his expression neutral but eyes sharp, evaluating Ethan's every move. Malcolm, across the table, leaned back with a calculated smirk, signaling readiness to challenge. Ethan stepped forward confidently, placing the organized files and digital tablet on the table. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to address concerns regarding the Benson project, and I believe it's crucial we review some internal discrepancies that have come to light. Ethan began, his voice steady and assertive. He clicked the tablet, projecting charts and emails onto the screen. Immediately, the room was drawn into the details. He highlighted misallocated funds, pointing to the vendor contracts that lacked proper documentation, and showcased internal communications suggesting deliberate concealment. Each revelation was paired with a clear plan of action, corrective measures, transparency protocols, and steps to prevent future occurrences. Walter leaned forward, scrutinizing each detail. Ethan, these are serious allegations. Have you verified everything independently? He asked, his tone measured but probing. I have, sir, Ethan replied without hesitation. Each document is cross-referenced, verified for authenticity, and the proposed actions ensure compliance with corporate policy and legal requirements. My objective is to protect the company while ensuring ethical responsibility. Malcolm interjected, attempting to undermine him. Ethan, are you suggesting that others in this room have been complicit in these oversights? His words were precise, designed to elicit defensiveness. Ethan held his gaze steadily. I'm not here to assign blame for personal gain. I'm here to address operational risks and implement solutions. The focus is on resolution, accountability, and long-term sustainability. Personal motives are secondary to the company's integrity. The boardroom remained tense. Colleagues shifted uneasily in their seats, the silent power dynamics palpable. Ethan could sense the delicate negotiation between authority, ambition, and ethical responsibility. Yet he pressed on, detailing the remediation strategies, emphasizing transparency, and illustrating how these measures would restore confidence among clients and investors. Walter Griffin finally spoke, his voice deliberate. Ethan, the clarity and rigor you've presented are commendable. However, implementing these changes requires cooperation from all involved. How do you plan to navigate internal resistance? Ethan leaned slightly forward, locking eyes with each key member in turn. By engaging everyone transparently, by demonstrating the benefits of integrity, and by ensuring that our actions are aligned with long-term success. Resistance may occur, but it cannot supersede accountability or ethical responsibility. Leadership is about making difficult choices and inspiring compliance through clarity and trust. A moment of silence followed. Then, slowly, nods of agreement appeared around the table. Malcolm's smirk softened, replaced by a subtle recognition of Ethan's strategic acumen. Walter's piercing gaze lingered on him, assessing the combination of courage, intellect, and poise. As the meeting concluded, Ethan sensed the subtle shift. He had not only exposed wrongdoing, but also secured influence, credibility, and alignment with ethical leadership. The room, once charged with tension and skepticism, now resonated with cautious optimism and respect. Later, Ethan received a private message from one of the junior analysts. Sir, I've forwarded additional documents that clarify vendor irregularities. It's a small piece, but it strengthens your position. Ethan smiled faintly. Thank you, Laura. Every piece matters. He realized that influence was not only derived from confrontation, but also from collaboration, observation, and strategic planning. The day ended with a subtle, yet profound transformation. Those who had doubted or challenged him began to reconsider their stance. Allies emerged quietly, offering support in subtle gestures, while rivals recalibrated their strategies. Ethan understood the delicate interplay between power, ethics, and perception. In the corporate world, victories were rarely absolute, but strategic triumphs were built on clarity, courage, and timing. As he left the office that evening, the The skyline of New York glimmered against the dusk, and a gentle rain began to fall. The streets reflected a mosaic of lights, mirroring the complexity and unpredictability of his professional journey. Each step he took was measured, deliberate, a reminder that triumph was not a moment but a process, a culmination of insight, action, and resilience. Ethan knew challenges awaited him tomorrow. New opportunities, rivalries, and unforeseen events would test his resolve. Yet for the first time, he felt the surge of strategic mastery, the knowledge that his decisions, executed with precision, had real impact, and that integrity, paired with calculated action, could shape not just his career, but the future of Griffin and Cole. By nightfall, he reflected on the lessons learned. Confrontation was necessary, but strategy ensured lasting impact. Transparency could provoke opposition, yet it also inspired trust. In the dance of corporate power, each choice resonated, each action created ripple effects, and those who balanced courage with calculation could turn adversity into triumph. Ethan understood that the final measure of success was not only the ability to expose wrongdoing, but to guide the aftermath, to influence perception, inspire compliance, and create structures that would endure long after the immediate conflict had passed. And in that realization, he found not only relief, but a quiet exhilaration. He had navigated the storm, preserved his principles, and emerged strategically triumphant. The morning sun filtered through the towering windows of Griffin and Cole, casting golden beams across the polished conference room. Ethan entered, feeling the calm after the storm, a sense of purpose solidifying within him. The prior days had been a whirlwind of discovery, confrontation, and strategic maneuvering, and today marked the culmination of his efforts. The final board review was scheduled, and the stakes were as high as ever. The board members were already seated. Walter Griffin, his expression steady yet cautious, waited at the head of the table, a silent measure of authority radiating from his posture. Malcolm, across the table, leaned forward with an intensity that betrayed both skepticism and curiosity. The room was tense, as if collectively holding its breath. Ethan's entrance, however, carried a quiet confidence, born not of arrogance, but of meticulous preparation and an unwavering sense of responsibility. "Good morning," Ethan began, voice firm yet measured. "I appreciate everyone being here. Today, we finalize our review of the corrective actions and outcomes stemming from the recent internal audit. We aim to not only resolve past discrepancies, but to establish robust processes that ensure transparency, compliance, and sustainable success moving forward." He clicked his tablet, and the projection illuminated detailed charts, timelines, and verified communications. Each slide was carefully structured to demonstrate the extent of the issues, the solutions implemented, and the tangible benefits realized. Board members leaned in, scrutinizing each element with analytical precision. Walter spoke first. "Ethan, your approach has been thorough. The transparency and clarity you've demonstrated are commendable. However, there remain concerns about the long-term adherence to these measures. How can we ensure this transformation is lasting?" Ethan met Walter's gaze steadily. "By embedding accountability into every level of operations. Training, audits, and transparent reporting are now mandatory. Responsibility is distributed to ensure checks and balances, with clear consequences for noncompliance. We are not just reacting, we are instituting systemic change." Malcolm interjected, his tone sharper than usual. "And what about the reputational damage? Public perception can be as influential as internal metrics. How do we manage that aspect?" Ethan clicked to the next slide, showing a series of strategic communications and outreach initiatives. "Proactive transparency is key. We have prepared detailed reports for stakeholders, highlighting the corrective measures taken and our commitment to integrity. Media channels will be informed to mitigate misperceptions, and client relationships are being reinforced with personal engagement. Our narrative is controlled not by rumors, but by documented action." There was a moment of silence. Then a subtle shift occurred in the room. Board members, previously tense, began nodding in acknowledgement. Allies emerged quietly in subtle gestures, offering support without overt declaration, while those initially skeptical recalibrated, recognizing the depth of Ethan's strategic foresight. Walter leaned back slightly, a rare smile forming. "Ethan, it appears your handling of this situation has not only mitigated risk, but strengthened our operational foundation. I commend your diligence and strategic execution." Malcolm, too, offered a restrained nod. "Well executed. The clarity and composure you've shown in navigating such a complex situation are impressive." There was no smirk this time, only genuine acknowledgement of Ethan's mastery over both the details and the human elements of leadership. As the meeting concluded, Ethan felt a quiet triumph. The resolution was not merely about exposing misconduct. It was about guiding transformation, inspiring confidence, and reinforcing ethical standards that would endure. The company was no longer merely reactive. It was positioned to act with foresight, resilience, and integrity. Later that day, Ethan received a discreet message from Laura. "Sir, the junior team members are requesting a meeting to thank you for your transparency and guidance. They feel empowered and recognized." Ethan smiled faintly, a sense of fulfillment mingling with exhaustion. "Thank them on my behalf. They're the reason this process succeeds. Their courage, observation, and support are invaluable." He realized that true leadership was not solitary. It relied on the alignment of capable individuals, each contributing their vigilance, intellect, and courage. As he left the office, the city streets shimmered with reflections from glass skyscrapers, a mosaic of light and shadow that mirrored the complexity of the corporate environment he had navigated. The hum of traffic, the distant chatter of pedestrians, and the occasional siren formed a rhythm, a reminder that life, like business, was dynamic, unpredictable, and interwoven with human endeavor. Ethan's thoughts lingered on the lessons of the past days. Confrontation, when paired with strategic planning, yielded not only resolution but long-term influence. Transparency, though uncomfortable at first, cultivated trust and alignment. Courage, exercised thoughtfully, inspired others to act ethically and responsibly. And the subtle interplay of human behavior, the unspoken gestures, silent acknowledgments, and nuanced interactions, was as critical as the numerical and procedural rigor. By evening, Ethan stood on a balcony overlooking the city, the sunset casting an amber glow across the skyline. He reflected on the personal growth he had achieved, the professional respect earned, and the ethical clarity solidified. The journey had tested not only his intellect, but his patience, resilience, and emotional intelligence. Each challenge had been an opportunity, each confrontation a lesson, and each decision a step toward lasting impact. He understood that legacy was not measured solely by victories or titles, but by the enduring structures and culture one leaves behind. The systems of accountability, the trust fostered among colleagues, and the example set for future leaders. These were the true markers of success. And in that understanding, Ethan felt both a quiet satisfaction and a renewed determination to continue navigating the complex intersection of power, ethics, and human ambition. The night deepened, city lights twinkling like scattered stars. Ethan knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, unforeseen risks, evolving strategies, and the constant demand for vigilance. Yet he faced them with confidence, aware that the lessons of the past week had fortified his capacity for discernment, resilience, and strategic influence. In the end, Ethan had not only exposed wrongdoing and restored integrity to Griffin and Cole, but he had also crafted a model of leadership defined by courage, meticulous planning, and ethical commitment. The resolution was complete, but the true legacy, the culture of accountability, empowerment, and transparency, would continue to evolve, shaped by the principles he had championed. As the city slept, Ethan stood poised on the edge of possibility, a leader transformed not by power alone, but by wisdom, vision, and the quiet but profound influence of integrity in action.